back to G.I. Joe.
He's probably made the Baroness's undies out of plastic explosives.
Hey gang, Flava Dave here, welcoming you to another episode of G.I. Joe, DisOrder of Battle, where we take a look at America's movable fighting man. Now this time around, I decided to cover two of my favorite things, G.I. Joe and Bad Girls.
Bad girls, talking about the sad girl.
Now of course, the most infamous bad girl in Joedom has to be the Baroness herself, Anastasia de Cobra. She's actually unusual among the vintage figures in that her character debuted in issue 1 of the G.I. Joe comic, which came out in '82, but a figure wasn't made of her until '84, which I believe makes her the only character in the vintage line created backwards like that. She first appeared in a Cobra blue outfit, but fortunately that got changed to the black leather bodysuit we all know and love. Her backstory in the comics was kind of convoluted, but like just about every other bad guy in Larry Hama's universe, it revolves around Snake Eyes. She blames him for her brother's death, and even eventually kidnaps him after his reconstructive surgery, which leads to him getting a face of hot coals, disfiguring him again. The Baroness was also a mainstay on the Sunbow animated G.I. Joe cartoon. In fact, during the first season, if a woman showed up who wasn't Scarlet, CoverGirl, or Lady J, it was almost always the Baroness in disguise. Sometimes, even if it was a wimpy dude, too.
The stupidest male I ever met!
During the second season, this role was increasingly taken over by Zorana. Interestingly, when Deke took over the animated series, the Baroness continued to play a key role, and Zorana was dumped, literally. This despite the fact that no Baroness figure had been on the market for almost 5 years at that point, which I think attests to the character's popularity. The accent used by voice actress Morgan Lofting was something they made up just for the show.
Pig!
Larry Hama has said that he always envisioned her more as a spoiled American heiress. In the comics, she was less a spy than a leader on the same level as Major Blood or the Crimson Twins, and she often used her sexuality to manipulate the men around her, which has led to her having a bit of a reputation. Ew. Even so, she always seems to come back to her darling Destro.
Stop that, Destro!
And the two are a couple in every iteration of the Joe saga so far. Even in the 2009 movie, even though there she was with Jimmy Mack as a result of mind-controlled nanites stupid Tommy from Third Rock injected into her. Yeah. Like I said, she only got one figure during the whole vintage run, but it was enough to launch 1,000 cosplays. That original mold was used a couple of more times, once in her initial Cobra Blue for the '95 Toys R Us exclusive 3-pack, and again for Chameleon, a different character who is Anastasia's half-sister and who gets plastic surgery and sent undercover, and a Crimson version that was part of the 2002 Joe-Con box set. Funnily enough, just a few years later, that set was revisited entirely in 25th anniversary style, including the Baroness, but I'm jumping ahead. There were two different new sculpt versions of her during the Valor vs. Venom and Spy Troop era, and one of those was repainted in blue again, and Hasbro made a completely new O-ring style sculpt for her for one of the comic 3-packs, which was again redone in a red color for the Cobra Procession 6-pack. Hasbro also made a minifig for Sigma 6, but she never made it into the 6-inch line, which is a shame because I actually think it's kind of an interesting outfit. The Baroness was one of the first 5 Cobras to receive the 25th anniversary treatment, and she was also one of the improved sculpts in the Cobra 5-pack that finished out the line. In between, she received a figure in her red scuba suit from the Mass Device miniseries, and her only single-carded 25th style figure, which put her back in Cobra Blue again, like her first appearance in the comic. Sienna Miller got to show off her assets as the Baroness in 2009's live-action Rise of Cobra movie. And there were 2 figures produced from the film. They added a bunch of metal studs to her costume, because I guess being covered from head to toe in black leather was just too subtle. She also finally joined the big leagues, literally, with a 12-inch figure, although sadly it was a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. but it did come with this sweet recruitment poster. Like most of the classic Real American Hero era characters, she appeared in G.I. Joe Resolute, although it was little more than a glorified cameo, and there is a figure due out this July as part of a box set. The Baroness may be the most enduring and drool-worthy of Cobra's bad girls, but she is far from the only one. I already mentioned Zorana, who debuted in 1986 along with her brother Xandar. Both were made using the same photosensitive plastic Hasbro used for Zartan a few years earlier, adding fuel to the debate over whether Zartan used technology and acting to achieve his disguises or was some kind of mutant. In her file card, Larry Hama clearly seems to favor the former. Zorana was also unusual in that while there are often minor paint variations and such in the vintage line, she had a major production change involving the sculpt of her head. Although they're generally differentiated by the fact that one has earrings and the other doesn't, as you can see, the two are radically different sculpts, and I prefer the one on the left. As I mentioned earlier, on the Sunbow cartoon, she basically replaced the Baroness for being the undercover female spy character in most of the second season episodes, and in one, went too deep and fell in love with Mainframe. I don't really recall her being much of a presence in the comics, although she was the focus of a famous cat fight on one of the covers. Like the Baroness, Zorana has been remade and reissued a couple of times. The original mold was reused and repainted for the 2004 Rampage in the Everglades convention box set. A year earlier, she had received the new sculpt treatment as part of the Spy Troops line, which is probably my favorite version of the character. And in 2005, a cobbled-together version of her with a new head sculpt was part of the direct-to-consumer comic 3-packs. Sadly, she has yet to be updated in the modern style. So while these two are clearly Cobra's main minxes of mayhem, there have been a few additional Fatale Femmes who have come along since the vintage days. The first was a repainted Jinx dubbed Vipra. She was part of the '98 Toys R Us exclusive series that came out in the immediate aftermath of the vintage line's demise. She was the driver for a reissued Stinger 4-wheel drive that for some inexplicable reason they decided to call the Rattler. Hasbro later issued 2 repaints of Jinx, both named Vipra, as part of a 6-pack, which was also exclusive to Toys R Us. But despite sporting Cobra logos on their outfits, their file cards make it clear their allegiance was more to the Arashikage clan, and were completely different characters from the 1998 version, who was more of kind of an ersatz Copperhead wannabe. Oh, and on the file card for the 98 Vipra, it lists her name as Kanda, N.A. Then in 2007, we got not merely one more bad girl, but a whole squadron. Dubbed the Night Stalkers, these bad girls were made from a mixture of old and new parts and were sold in the JoeCon exclusive Tanks for the Memories box set. They all used the same mold, which was a mixture of parts, but they had new head sculpts with 3 different hair colors between them, and an officer who had her own unique paint job. Although some folks griped about the fact that their uniforms had these open backs and were kind of like fetish gear more than military garb, I suspect most Vipers were just happy to see someone flashing a little skin other than these characters. Finally, we come to the last of our sinister sirens, a new character, Munitia. She was intended to be part of Hasbro's direct-to-consumers line, but got caught up in the last wave, which was cancelled, but brought back through the fan club. She reuses the body from an earlier Baroness figure, and her goggles flip up to reveal her face. Munitia is actually more of a mercenary than a loyal Cobra soldier, and her file card mentions her close ties to Firefly and, Blackout? Yeah, him. So there you have it. Until Hasbro gets around to making a Pythona or Xena figure, that about wraps it up for my look at the bad girls of G.I. Joe. Unless there's something about Lady J she doesn't want us to know. Dun dun dun!
Destro and the Baroness, Destro and the Baroness, practicing the clarinet. Destro and the Baroness, practicing the clarinet, practicing the clarinet, practicing the clarinet.
You vain, babbling, moronic pig!